It was a chilly October night when Alexander Croft arrived at Croft Manor after a 3-week business trip. He was exhausted, but satisfied. He'd closed deals that would secure the future of the family empire for at least a decade. The stone mansion, with its meticulously manicured gardens, stood majestic under the moonlight, exactly as he remembered it from his childhood. Alexander parked his luxury sedan in the garage and noticed only 2 windows were lit. The kitchen and Eleanor's, his stepmother's. He sighed heavily. Even 3 years after the death of his father John, Eleanor remained at the manor, a situation that deeply irritated him. To Alexander, she'd always been an opportunist, someone who'd preyed on his father's emotional vulnerability after the death of his mother, Isabel. Croft Manor was a symbol of power and tradition. Built in the early 20th century, it had housed 3 generations of the family. Alexander had grown up, running through its marble hallways, playing in the sprawling gardens, dreaming of one day taking over his father's business. But his mother's untimely death when he was only 12 had changed everything. The house became quieter, colder. And Eleanor's arrival 2 years later only intensified his feeling that the family he knew was gone forever. It was precisely 2:15 a.m. when Alexander decided to take one last look at the gardens before heading to his room. He had a habit of walking through the back garden when he needed to relax, especially after long trips. The place always connected him to childhood memories, when he ran amongst the roses his mother had loved so much. Isabel spent hours tending those flowers, explaining to young Alexander that each rose needed specific care, patience, and a lot of love to fully bloom. But what he saw that cold October night left him completely paralyzed. Eleanor was kneeling in the middle of the back garden, digging a hole with a garden trowel. Beside her, an antique metal box gleamed under the silvery moonlight. The 52-year-old woman, usually so composed and elegant, looked desperate. Her hands trembled as she dug with urgency, and Alexander could see she was sweating despite the chill of the early morning. Alexander hid behind one of the veranda columns, his heart pounding like a war drum. What in the world was Eleanor doing? What was that box? Why did she seem so nervous, constantly looking around as if afraid of being discovered? The whole scene seemed like something out of a suspense film. But it was happening right there, in the garden where his mother used to plant roses. For 20 long minutes, Alexander watched in silence as Eleanor finished digging. The hole seemed to be at least 2 feet deep. She carefully placed the metal box in the hole, as if she were burying something extremely valuable or dangerous. Then she carefully covered it with soil, layer by layer, ensuring it was level with the rest of the garden. Eleanor smoothed the soil with her hands, threw dry leaves on top to disguise it, and remained there for a few minutes, motionless, as if saying goodbye to something very important. The cold morning wind made the trees whisper, creating an even more mysterious atmosphere. Alexander felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the temperature. There was something profoundly disturbing about the scene he was witnessing. Eleanor wasn't just burying an object, she was performing some kind of ritual, an act laden with emotion and meaning. When Eleanor finally went inside, her shoulders slumped as if carrying an invisible weight. Alexander remained in the garden for another half-hour. His mind was teeming with possibilities and theories. What was his stepmother hiding? Was it money embezzled from the inheritance? Compromising documents? Evidence of some crime? The distrust he'd always harbored for Eleanor intensified exponentially, like a fire gaining fuel. Throughout his adult life, Alexander had prided himself on his ability to read people, to identify lies and hidden intentions. It was a skill that had made him successful in business. But Eleanor had always been an enigma to him. She was too polite, too careful, too perfect to be genuine. And now, finally, he had caught something that proved his suspicions that she was hiding important secrets. If you've ever experienced the unsettling feeling of discovering someone close to you is hiding something important, leave a super thanks to support stories that reveal hidden truths. Your contribution helps us bring you more narratives, exploring the secrets that exist within our own families. For the next 3 days, Alexander couldn't get the scene out of his head. It was as if a disturbing film kept replaying in his mind, always at the same point. He observed Eleanor during meals, looking for signs of nervousness, analyzing every gesture, every word, every pause. But she remained the same as always, cordial, reserved, efficient, like a Swiss watch. Eleanor continued to care for the house with the same meticulous dedication as always. She prepared coffee exactly as Alexander liked it, strong and without sugar. She kept his rooms impeccable, his clothes always pressed and organized. She prepared his favorite meals when asked, never showing irritation or tiredness. She maintained the routine she had established during the 30 years she had lived in the mansion, a routine that Alexander had always considered artificial, performative. But now he knew that look Eleanor carried. It was the same look his mother Isabel had when she hid Christmas presents in the bedroom closet, or when his father John planned family surprises. A look that mixed excitement, nervousness, and the satisfaction of keeping an important secret. Eleanor was definitely hiding something significant, and it was consuming him from the inside like a slow poison. Alexander started paying attention to details that had previously gone unnoticed. The way Eleanor looked at certain photographs in the house, especially those that included his mother. The way she touched the objects that had belonged to Isabel, always with excessive delicacy. The phone calls she made in a low voice, always. Interrupted when Alexander appeared, small signs that now took on new meaning in light of what he had witnessed in the garden. On the 4th night after the incident, when he was absolutely sure Eleanor was asleep, Alexander went down to the garden, equipped with a garden trowel and a small flashlight. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat he feared might wake Eleanor. Finding the exact spot wasn't difficult. The earth was subtly different from the rest of the garden, darker in hue, looser in texture. The fallen leaves didn't quite cover the freshly disturbed area, creating an uneven pattern that betrayed recent activity. With extreme care, Alexander began to dig. Each movement of the garden trowel was calculated, silent, deliberate. The soil was softer than he expected, making the work easier. After 15 minutes of careful excavation, the trowel struck something solid, a muffled metallic clang that sent his heart racing. The antique metal box was heavier than it appeared under the moonlight. It held the weight of something filled with dense documents or objects. It was old, with embossed decorations suggesting a European, possibly Italian, origin. The lock, though aged, was still in good condition. Alexander carefully carried it to his private study, his hands trembling not just from the physical exertion, but from the anxiety and anticipation of what he might find. Alexander's study was his personal sanctuary in Croft Manor, filled with business books, photographs of professional achievements, and a few cherished childhood mementos. It was where he made the most important decisions, where he planned company strategies, where he retreated when he needed to think clearly. And that night, it would become the place where he would uncover truths that would completely reshape his understanding of the last 30 years of his life, using a screwdriver and pliers, tools he kept in a drawer for minor repairs. Alexander worked on the antique lock for nearly half an hour. His hands sweated despite the chill, and each attempt to open the box heightened his anxiety. Finally, with a satisfying click, The lock gave way. What he found inside completely altered the course of his thoughts and his life. It wasn't hidden money. It wasn't compromising legal documents. It wasn't evidence of crimes or fraud. It was something infinitely more complex, more disturbing, and more revealing than anything his imagination had conceived. The box contained dozens of handwritten letters, all in his father John's familiar script, addressed to Eleanor, but there was something impossible about these letters. The dates. The damned dates that made absolutely no sense with the history Alexander knew about his family. The first letter was dated 1991. 2 full years before the death of his mother, Isabel, which occurred in 1993. This meant John and Eleanor had known each other long before they ever admitted to the family. It meant the entire story Alexander knew about how Eleanor came into his father's life was an elaborate lie, with hands trembling like leaves in the wind. Alexander opened the first letter, his mind still resisting the possibility that everything he believed might be wrong. "My dearest Eleanor," it began, "I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done for Isabel. I know it's not easy seeing her like this, sick, frail, losing weight every day, when you two were so close as teenagers. But your presence has been the strength that has kept our family together during this difficult time. Alexander doesn't quite understand what's happening yet, but I feel your positive influence is helping him cope better with his mother's situation." Alexander stopped reading, completely bewildered. Eleanor and his mother were close. They were teenage friends. How was that possible? This had never been mentioned by anyone in the family. Not his father, not his uncles, not his grandparents. He had always assumed, always believed with absolute certainty, that Eleanor was a complete stranger who appeared in his father's life after the tragedy, taking advantage of his emotional vulnerability. With a racing heart and increasingly trembling hands, Alexander continued reading the letters. Each one revealed details that completely contradicted the narrative he knew and had cultivated for decades. Eleanor wasn't a gold digger who took advantage of John's vulnerability after Isabel's death. She was, in fact, his mother's childhood best friend, who had specifically returned to care for her during the 2 terrible years of her terminal illness. One letter in particular, dated just a week before Isabel's death, left him completely breathless. The words seemed to leap from the page and pierce his heart like sharp daggers. "Eleanor," it read, "Isabel asked me to write this to you because she no longer has the strength to hold a pen. Her hands are too weak, and the pain is sometimes unbearable, but she wants you to know, needs you to know, that there is nothing in this world she desires more than to see you taking care of me and Alexander after she's gone. She says you are the only person she trusts to keep our family protected, to ensure that love doesn't disappear from this house along with her. Please, Eleanor, I implore you, don't abandon Alexander. He will resist at first. That's inevitable. But he needs a mother figure, even if he never admits it to himself or others." The letter continued, but Alexander had to stop for a few minutes. Tears blurred his vision, and a feeling of nausea washed over him. Everything he believed, everything he had built as truth about his family and about Eleanor, was crumbling like a house of cards hit by a hurricane. There were also carefully preserved medical documents, receipts for experimental treatments, all paid for by Eleanor Croft, proof of blood donations she made for Isabel, detailed records of hospital shifts, showing that Eleanor spent countless hours by his mother's bedside during the worst moments of her illness. There were receipts for expensive medications, for consultations with specialists in other cities, for medical equipment rented to make Isabel's last months more comfortable. Eleanor had literally spent all her savings as a teacher to pay for Isabel's treatments, savings that represented years and years of hard work, of personal sacrifices, of deferred dreams, all invested in the desperate hope of saving her best friend's life, even when the doctors had already given up hope. And then Alexander found something that made him completely break down, cry like he hadn't cried since childhood. A letter written by Isabel herself, in the trembling and irregular handwriting of her last days, when holding a pen was a Herculean effort. My dearest Alexander, if you're reading this, it means Eleanor finally found the courage to reveal the truth I promised her she'd keep. She was my best friend since we were 15. My sister. The one person who knows all my secrets, fears and dreams. She was the only person genuinely by my side during the difficult times of my illness. When even some family members distanced themselves, unable to cope with the pain of watching me wither away. When I'm gone, and we both know that soon, Eleanor promised to take care of you and your father. Not as a replacement trying to take my place, that would be impossible and disrespectful to our memory, but as an extension of the love I feel for you both, as a guardian of the values and affection we always wanted our family to represent. Please, my beloved son, don't judge her for the pain she feels at my absence. She gave up her own happiness, her own dreams of having a family, to honor my last wish to see you protected and loved. Love her as I loved her, Alexander, as a sister, a protector, a second mother who chose you above everything life could offer. Eleanor is one of the purest and most generous people I've ever known, and I trust her more than any other human being in this world. If one day you discover this truth, I hope you'll be able to forgive both her and me for keeping it secret. We did it to protect you, so you wouldn't feel obligated to love us out of gratitude or pity. The tears Alexander had held back for days, years, decades finally escaped like a bursting dam. For 30 entire years he treated Eleanor with coldness, disdain, always, seeing her as a gold digger who had infiltrated his family. And during all that immeasurable time, she was the sacred guardian of his mother's last will, enduring his hatred, the constant rejection, the cold stares, to protect Isabel's memory and care for the family she had promised to preserve above all else. How many people in our lives make silent sacrifices we never acknowledge? If this story is touching your heart, consider leaving a super thanks. Each contribution allows us to continue exploring the profound truths about family, forgiveness, and redemption that are right before our eyes. Alexander spent the entire night reading every document, every letter, every receipt, every little piece of paper, revealing another layer of the truth he had ignored for so long. As the sun began to rise, painting the sky in golden and rosy hues, he had a completely new understanding of the last 30 years of his life. Eleanor wasn't a villain who took advantage of a family tragedy. She was a heroine who accepted being hated, rejected, and misunderstood to continue loving and protecting. But there was more in the box. At the bottom, carefully protected by silk fabric, Alexander found a sealed envelope with his own name written in Eleanor's elegant and familiar handwriting. With hands now trembling not with anxiety, but with anticipation and fear of what he might discover, he opened the envelope and read, "My dearest Alexander, if you are reading this, it means I failed to keep the secret until the end of my life, as I promised to do. Forgive me for this failure. During all these long years, 30 years of living together, I respected your right to hate me, to reject me, to see me as an intruder, because I understood that it was your natural way of dealing with the immense pain of losing your mother. I never wanted to take Isabel's place. That would be impossible, disrespectful, and a Betrayal of the memory of the most extraordinary woman I ever knew. I only tried, to the best of my ability, to honor the sacred promise I made to her to protect her family, to ensure that love continued to exist in this house even after her passing. I know I often failed, that I didn't always know how to get close to you without seeming invasive, that perhaps I was too rigid or too distant at times that demanded more human warmth. Today, I decided to bury this box because I don't want you to carry the weight of this truth after I'm gone. Some secrets are truly too heavy for the living to carry, especially when revealing them could cause unnecessary guilt. I will leave the manor next month and move to a small apartment in the city centre. It's time for you to move on without the constant presence of a painful memory of the past. I want you to know, Alexander, that taking care of you and your father during all these years has been the honor and privilege of my entire life. Even with your understandable coldness, even with your natural rejection, even with the long silences during meals, I never regretted it for a single day. Isabel asked me to love you, and I loved with every fiber of my being. That's how true love works. It doesn't give up, it doesn't get tired, it doesn't get offended, even when it's not reciprocated or understood. Be happy, Alexander. Build your own family. Find a woman who loves you as you deserve to. Be loved. And when you have children, always remember that true love sometimes manifests in ways we don't immediately understand. Sometimes the greatest love is the one that sacrifices itself in silence, that serves without expecting recognition, that protects without expecting gratitude. With all my love, admiration, and gratitude for the wonderful years we shared, even if you never realized how wonderful they were for me, Eleanor. Alexander felt as if the ground had literally disappeared beneath his feet. The world had become unrecognizable in a single night. Eleanor was planning to leave the manor that had been her home for 3 decades. She was burying the deepest secrets of her life so he would never know the truth about her sacrifice, and intended to leave, carrying alone the weight of 30 years of unacknowledged love, unvalued sacrifice, misunderstood heroism. In that moment of absolute clarity, sitting in his study as the sun rose outside, Alexander understood the immeasurable depth of what he had lost throughout his adult life. Not just a stepmother he had misjudged. He had lost a second mother who chose to be rejected so she could continue protecting. An extraordinary woman who honored Isabel's memory in the purest and most sacrificial way possible, loving unconditionally those she loved most, even when that love was met with coldness and disdain. Eleanor had given up everything. The chance to remarry, to have children of her own, to build an independent life. It was a silent vow, a promise whispered to a dying friend, a promise Eleanor, the silent guardian, carried for decades, enduring misunderstanding, to keep a family together, protected. It was a heroism Alexander never imagined possible, a love that transcended anything he knew or understood. 6 a.m. Alexander climbed the Croft Manor stairs, his steps deliberate. He knocked on Eleanor's door. No more. Wounded pride, no festering resentment, no perpetuated misunderstandings, only the desperate urgency to right 30 years of terrible injustice before it was too late. Before Eleanor disappeared, carrying the pain of unacknowledged sacrifice alone. Eleanor, I need to talk to you. It's urgent. The door opened slowly, revealing a woman whose natural elegance couldn't quite mask the deep weariness in her eyes, the worry lines etched on her face, the weight of years of emotional solitude. Eleanor looked at Alexander with genuine surprise. It was the first time in many years he'd voluntarily knocked on her door, and certainly the first time with such urgency in his voice. Alexander, what's wrong? Are you all right? You look like you haven't slept all night." Alexander raised the antique metal box. He saw instant recognition in Eleanor's eyes, followed immediately by an expression of pure panic, confirming his deepest suspicions. "Something is wrong, Eleanor. Something terrible. I've spent my entire life being a complete idiot, a blind, deaf, and insensitive man. I discovered the truth you've kept hidden for 30 years, to protect me from my own stupidity. Is there anything more painful than discovering you've misjudged someone who has always loved you? If you've ever had to apologize for years of misunderstandings, leave a super thanks. Your contribution helps us continue, sharing stories about the courage it takes to admit our mistakes and seek redemption." Eleanor looked at the box in Alexander's hands, and her legs literally gave way. She leaned against the doorframe, her face as pale as paper, her eyes wide with shock and terror. It was as if all her worst fears were materializing before her, simultaneously. "Alexander, I can explain. Please let me explain. I never wanted you to find out like this. I was going to leave. Without you knowing, I was going to take the secret with me forever." "You don't need to explain anything," Alexander interrupted, his voice choked with emotions he could no longer control. "I need to explain. I need to explain why I was so blind for so long, so cruel without realizing it, so unjust to the only person who truly honored my mother's memory. I need to explain why I wasted 30 years rejecting the greatest gift Isabel could have given me." Eleanor began to cry. It wasn't a dramatic or hysterical cry, but a quiet sob that seemed to carry 3 decades of contained pain, unrequited love, unacknowledged sacrifices, tears she had held back for so long. They seemed to have gained weight, substance of their own. "I never wanted you to know the truth," she whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. "Your mother made me promise to keep it secret forever. She didn't want you or your father to feel obligated to love me out of gratitude, pity, or a sense of duty. She wanted, if you ever accepted me truly, it would be by genuine choice, real affection, not moral obligation." Alexander couldn't contain himself anymore. All the emotional barriers he'd built over decades crumbled at once. He gently placed the box on the floor and hugged Eleanor for the first time in 30 years. Not the formal, cold hug of obligatory greetings on special occasions, but the desperate, necessary embrace of a son who finally recognizes his mother after years of willful blindness. "Forgive me, Eleanor. Please forgive me for being so stupid, so proud, so incapable of seeing what was right in front of my eyes. You gave up everything to take care of us, sacrificed your own happiness to honor a promise of love, and I repaid you with coldness, disdain, and ingratitude. I am unworthy of the love you showed our family." Eleanor hugged him back, her small body trembling with sobs that echoed years and years of loneliness, misunderstanding, and unrequited love. It was as if all the accumulated pain was finally finding an outlet, a relief, a resolution. "There's nothing to forgive, my son. There was never anything to forgive. I always understood your pain, your anger, your need to reject me. Losing Isabel was devastating for all of us, but especially for you, who were so young, so vulnerable. Your coldness was understandable, even expected. It was your way of protecting your heart from another possible loss." "But you lost your best friend," Alexander murmured against her hair, breathing in the gentle scent he'd always associated with care and protection. "You lost the most important person in your life, and yet you sacrificed everything to care for 2 ungrateful men who couldn't see beyond their own pain. How did you manage to be so strong? How did you manage to love us despite our blindness?" Eleanor pulled back slightly to look directly into Alexander's eyes, her hands gently touching his face. with the tenderness he vaguely remembered from childhood, when he'd have nightmares about his mother's death and wake up calling for her. Because your mother taught me that true love is unconditional. It doesn't depend on being reciprocated to exist. She loved me even when I was a rebellious and difficult teenager. I loved her even when she was dying, and every day was torture watching her wither, and I learned to love you even when you couldn't love me back, even when I represented a painful reminder of what you had lost. That's how authentic love works, Alexander. It doesn't give up. It doesn't tire. It doesn't take offense. It simply continues to exist and manifest itself through care, protection, and dedication. In that transformative moment, looking into the eyes of this extraordinary woman who had sacrificed 3 decades of her life to honor a promise of love and protect a family that hadn't always recognized her, Alexander finally understood what his mother had seen in Eleanor. It wasn't just loyalty or deep friendship. It was the rare and precious ability to love unconditionally, to find genuine purpose in serving others, to transform personal pain into care and protection for those we love. Eleanor possessed a quality Alexander had spent his entire life searching for in business partners, romantic relationships, friendships, the quality of unwavering loyalty, unbreakable commitment, a love unshaken by hardship or ingratitude. She was exactly the kind of person anyone would want by their side during life's most difficult moments. "You're not going anywhere," he said firmly, his voice thick with determination and emotion. "This is your home, Eleanor. It's always been your home from the moment Isabel asked you to. And take care of us, and I—" Alexander paused, swallowing the pride that had blinded him for so long. "I would very much like to learn how to be the son you deserve if you'll give me a second chance. If you can forgive decades of stupidity and let me make up for at least a small part of all the love you've given us." Eleanor smiled through her tears, and Alexander realized it was the first genuine, complete, radiant smile he'd seen on her face in many, many years. It was a smile that illuminated her entire face, making her look decades younger, revealing the vibrant, loving woman who had always existed behind the mask of composure she wore to protect everyone. "You've always been my son, Alexander. From the first day your mother asked me to take care of you both, from the moment I promised to protect this family, I was just patiently waiting for you to be ready to accept that reality, to allow me to show you the maternal love I've always felt for you." In the months that followed that revealing morning, Alexander and Eleanor embarked on the long but rewarding process of rebuilding their relationship on a solid foundation of truth, mutual gratitude, and deep understanding. Alexander discovered that the woman he had judged so harshly for decades was, in fact, one of the wisest, most compassionate, and interesting people he had ever known. Eleanor possessed a vast culture acquired during years of solitary reading. She spoke 4 languages fluently, understood art, music, literature, and history. She had traveled the world in her youth before settling down as a teacher and dedicating her life to caring for others. She had intelligent opinions on politics, economics, and social issues. She was funny when she felt comfortable enough to relax. She told fascinating stories about her friendship with Isabel, revealing aspects of her mother's personality that Alexander had never known. Eleanor, in turn, flourished like a plant finally receiving the sunlight it always needed. Being able to finally express the maternal love she had kept secret for 3 decades, she became more vibrant, more communicative, more present. The entire house felt more alive, more welcoming, more like the home Alexander remembered from his childhood. Alexander also made an important decision that would forever symbolize the transformation of his understanding of family and love. He commissioned a memorial in the garden, Exactly where Eleanor had buried the box with the secrets that changed everything. But it wouldn't be a memorial just for Isabel, as he had originally planned. It would be a memorial to all the extraordinary women who shape and protect families through sacrificial love. Biological mothers and mothers of the heart, women who find creative and dedicated ways to love, even when that love is not immediately understood, recognized, or reciprocated. Women who choose to stay when it would be easier to leave, who choose to love when it would be safer to protect themselves, who choose to serve when they could demand to be served. The inscription on the memorial, engraved in white marble that gleamed in the sunlight, simply read, "To Isabel, who taught us about unconditional love, and to Eleanor, who showed us that true love never gives up, even when it's not understood. Eternal gratitude to the women who protect families through silent sacrifice." The garden around the memorial was replanted with the same kinds of roses Isabel had loved so much, but now cared for by Eleanor's experienced and loving hands. It was a perfect symbol of the continuity of love. How care can pass from one generation to another, from one extraordinary woman to another. If this story touched your heart and made you reflect on the people in your life who perhaps deserve more recognition and gratitude than they receive, consider leaving a super thanks. Each contribution allows us to continue sharing stories that remind us of the importance of seeing beyond appearances and recognizing the silent heroes who exist around us. Your help is what makes it possible to explore these deep truths about family, forgiveness, and redemption. 5 years after that life-changing morning when Alexander finally married a wonderful woman who immediately recognized and valued Eleanor's presence in the family, they had their first daughter. Alexander didn't hesitate for a moment when choosing the child's name, Isabel Eleanor Croft. When people asked about the double name, which happened frequently, Alexander proudly told the story of two extraordinary women who had shaped his life in different but equally important ways. One who taught him about unconditional love through her presence during his early years, and another who taught him about the same unconditional love through decades of silent sacrifice and unrecognized dedication. Eleanor, now officially recognized and celebrated as the matriarch of the Croft family, held her granddaughter in her arms with a tenderness that made everyone around them smile. She whispered the same lullabies she had once sung to Alexander when he was a child and would wake up screaming from nightmares about losing his mother. They were songs in Italian that her own grandmother had taught her, songs that spoke of eternal love, divine protection, and the continuity of family ties across generations. Little Isabel Eleanor had her father's eyes, but her grandmother, Eleanor's smile, and a sweet temperament that seemed to have been inherited from both women whose names she bore. She was a serene, happy child who seemed to intuitively feel the amount of love that surrounded her. During the baby's first months, Alexander often watched Eleanor caring for her granddaughter and felt a deep gratitude that sometimes left him speechless. There was so much experience in those hands, so much accumulated love, so much wisdom about caring for children. Eleanor instinctively knew how to soothe the baby's cries when she was hungry, how to make her sleep. It was as if all the motherhood she had kept inside for decades had finally found its full expression. The afternoons at Croft Manor became magical moments. Eleanor would tell stories about Isabel to her granddaughter, who also bore the name, describing the biological grandmother she'd never know, but whose legacy of love would continue to live through generations. Alexander listened to these stories too, constantly discovering new aspects of his mother that Eleanor had preserved in her memory like precious treasures. Some truths are simply too heavy for the living to carry, but when finally revealed at the right moment, they have the extraordinary power to heal seemingly incurable wounds and to unite hearts that seem destined to remain forever divided. The Croft Manor Gardens had never been more beautiful than under the combined care of Alexander and Eleanor. Isabel's roses bloomed exuberantly, more vibrant than ever, nurtured by Eleanor's experienced hands and Alexander's renewed dedication. The memorial in the center of the garden became a place of peace and reflection, where 3 generations gathered regularly to celebrate not only the memory of those who had passed, but especially the precious presence of those who chose to stay and love unconditionally. On Sunday mornings, after family breakfast, Alexander, his wife Eleanor, and little Isabel Eleanor would have picnics in the garden. Eleanor would prepare everyone's favorite dishes, including some special recipes that the original Isabel had taught her decades ago. It was a tradition that connected the past, the present, and the future in a continuous celebration of family love. During these special mornings, Alexander often reflected on how his life might have been different if he hadn't discovered the truth about Eleanor. She could have left Croft Manor as she'd planned, taking with her all the secrets, all the unrequited love, all the unrecognized dedication. He would have forever lost the opportunity to truly know the extraordinary woman his mother had chosen to protect his family. More importantly, his daughter would have grown up without Eleanor's presence, without her stories, without her wisdom, without her unconditional love. Future generations of the Croft family would have lost their connection to an immeasurable source of strength, legacy, and genuine values. The antique metal box that once held painful secrets and misunderstandings transformed into the source of the greatest discovery and transformation of Alexander's life. It now occupied a place of honor in the manor's library, no longer buried or hidden, but displayed as a symbol of the importance of truth, forgiveness, and the courage to confront our own prejudices and blind spots. Sometimes, on quiet nights when everyone was asleep, Alexander would descend to the library and look at the box, remembering the night that changed everything. It was a memory that mixed regret for years lost, with immense gratitude for the redemption that became possible. Family. Alexander learned through this transformative experience isn't just about blood ties or legal documents. It's about conscious choice, voluntary sacrifice, and the courage to love even when that love isn't immediately understood or reciprocated. It's about people who decide to stay when it would be easier to leave, who choose to love when it would be safer to protect themselves, who choose to serve when they could demand to be served. Eleanor had been all of that and more. For 30 years, she was the silent guardian of the values Isabel most cherished: compassion, dedication, unconditional love, and the unwavering belief that every family can be healed and strengthened when there is at least one person willing to love without conditions. The most important testament Isabel left wasn't written on letterhead or registered in court. It was written in Eleanor's heart through a promise of love and care that she honored every day of her life for 3 decades. It was a living testament, manifested through lovingly prepared meals, quiet care, constant presence, and an unwavering faith in the possibility of redemption and forgiveness. Alexander finally understood that he had inherited much more than money or property from his parents. He had inherited the example of 2 extraordinary women, one who taught him about love through life, and another who taught him about the same love through sacrifice. Together, they had created a legacy of values that he could now pass on to his own daughter, and to future generations of the Croft family. In the end, The story of Alexander and Eleanor became a powerful testament to the human capacity for transformation, forgiveness, and redemption. It showed that it's never too late to acknowledge our mistakes, to ask for genuine forgiveness, and to begin again based on truth and mutual gratitude. More importantly, it demonstrated that the true heroes of our lives are often those who serve in silence, who love without expecting recognition, who sacrifice without expecting gratitude. They are people like Eleanor, who find their purpose not in being admired or celebrated, but in protecting and nurturing those they choose to love. Croft Manor continued to be a symbol of family tradition, but now it represented something even deeper, proof that true love has the power to heal any wound, overcome any misunderstanding, and create bonds that transcend blood, time, and circumstance. And so, the box buried in the garden under the moonlight became the catalyst for the greatest discovery of Alexander's life. That family is a verb, not a noun. It's something we consciously create through our daily choices to love, serve, forgive, and remain together even when it's difficult. Eleanor had understood this from the beginning, from the moment she made that impossible promise to a dying friend. Alexander took 30 years to learn the same lesson. But when he finally understood it, it transformed not only his relationship with Eleanor, but his entire understanding of what it truly means to belong to a family and to be worthy of the unconditional love that some extraordinary human beings are capable of offering. The years that followed the revelation of the truth brought a profound transformation not only to the relationship between Alexander and Eleanor, but to the very atmosphere of Croft Manor, the house, which for decades had been elegant but cold, formal but distant, gradually transformed into a true home, filled with warmth, meaningful conversations, and moments of genuine family intimacy. Alexander discovered that Eleanor possessed a subtle and intelligent sense of humor that she had carefully kept hidden all those years. On the nights they dined together, Eleanor would recount hilarious anecdotes from her years as a teacher, mimicking the pompous mannerisms of headmasters, and detailing the creative mischief of her favorite students. Alexander found himself genuinely laughing for the first time in years, discovering that his stepmother was not only wise and dedicated, but also fun and engaged with the world around her. She also revealed artistic talents she had quietly cultivated. Eleanor painted delicate watercolors during solitary afternoons, creating landscapes of the Croft Manor gardens in different seasons. Her paintings captured not only the physical beauty of the place, but also its emotional evolution over the decades. Alexander was moved to discover that she had painted dozens of portraits of him at different ages, always from memory, documenting his growth from childhood to adulthood with a tenderness and attention to detail that revealed the maternal love she had always felt but could never openly express. The Manor's library became their favorite spot for long evening conversations. Eleanor had read voraciously throughout those years of relative solitude and possessed an impressive knowledge of world literature, philosophy, art history, and international politics. Alexander discovered he could discuss anything with her, from business strategies to profound existential questions, and always emerged from these conversations intellectually and emotionally enriched. One of the most touching moments of this new phase occurred when Alexander found a diary Eleanor had secretly kept throughout her years at the manor. She gave him permission to read it after much hesitation, explaining that she had written it as a way to process her emotions and maintain her sanity during the most difficult periods of rejection and misunderstanding. The diary's pages revealed the depth of the maternal love Eleanor always felt for Alexander, documented in poignant detail. She had recorded every small accomplishment of his since adolescence. His first girlfriends, described with the caring concern of a mother who wants her son to be happy but fears he might get hurt. His academic graduations, celebrated in silence because she didn't feel entitled to express her pride publicly. His professional successes, accompanied by entire pages of reflections on how John would be proud of the man his son had become. Even more touching were the entries documenting Eleanor's concerns during periods when Alexander was struggling. When he had a nervous breakdown at 28 due to business pressure, Eleanor had spent sleepless nights researching executive stress and ways to help, even knowing he would reject any direct offer of support. She had secretly reorganized her household routine to create a more peaceful environment at the manor, preparing his favorite meals without fanfare, and even hiring an additional gardener to ensure the gardens were always impeccable, because she knew Alexander found peace in contemplating nature. The diary also revealed moments of profound doubt Eleanor had faced over the years. Periods when she questioned whether she was doing the right thing by staying at the manor, whether her presence was truly honoring Isabel's memory or simply prolonging everyone's pain. She had considered leaving at least a dozen times over the 3 decades, but always found the strength to continue by remembering the promise made to her dying best friend. 1. Entry in particular made Alexander weep like he hadn't since childhood. It was from a date he remembered well, his 30th birthday. He had spent the entire day away from the manor, deliberately avoiding any family celebration, and returned late at night finding only a small gift wrapped in plain paper discreetly left on his desk. It was a rare book on investment strategies he had casually mentioned months before, accompanied by a card that simply said, "Happy Birthday." He had assumed it was just a formal gesture, with no real emotion behind it, but the diary revealed the truth. Eleanor had spent weeks searching for that specific book, visiting dozens of antique bookstores and contacting collectors in other cities. When she finally found it, she had spent a significant amount of her personal savings to buy it. On the night of his birthday, after Alexander went up to his room without even properly thanking her for the gift, she had written, "Today, Alexander turned 30. I remember so clearly the 12-year-old boy who became an orphan, so lost, so angry with the world. Isabel would be so proud of the man he has become, so strong, so intelligent, so capable of achieving everything he desires in life. I so desperately wanted to tell him this, to celebrate his achievements openly, to be the proud mother his heart still needs, even if he never admits it. But I know my place is in the shadows, quietly caring, discreetly loving, hoping that one day, perhaps, he will understand that he always had a complete family, even if he didn't recognize all its members." Reading these words decades later, Alexander finally understood the full extent of what he had lost during all those years of unnecessary coldness. Not just a maternal figure, but a silent cheerleader, a potential confidant, a source of wisdom and emotional support that had always been available, patiently waiting to be accepted. The transformation of the relationship between Alexander and Eleanor also had profound impacts on their respective personal lives. Alexander discovered that finally having a mature and wise maternal figure in his life helped him develop healthier and more mature romantic relationships. Eleanor, with her life experience and her deep understanding of love and sacrifice, became an invaluable advisor when Alexander began seriously dating the woman who would eventually become his wife. Eleanor had immediately sensed that Marina was different from the other women Alexander had dated over the years. During a family dinner, she discreetly observed how Marina treated the household staff, how she talked about her own family, how she reacted to stories about the Croft industrial empire's history. After Marina left, Eleanor simply said, "This one is special, Alexander. She has the generous heart of your mother." And Eleanor was right. Marina not only immediately accepted Eleanor's importance in the family, but she came to see her as the loving mother-in-law she'd always wished for. The two women developed a genuine friendship, with Marina frequently asking Eleanor for advice on how to care for Alexander, how to keep a welcoming home, and how to build meaningful family traditions. When Alexander proposed to Marina, it was Eleanor who helped him plan the perfect proposal. She suggested he propose in the Croft Manor back garden, right next to the memorial they had built together, because it would be a way to include Isabel in the celebration and to begin this new phase of the family with the blessings of all the women you love. The proposal was magical, romantic. Alexander had hundreds of tiny lights installed in the trees surrounding the memorial, creating a fairy tale atmosphere. Eleanor had prepared a special dinner and then discreetly withdrew, allowing the couple privacy for the most important moment of their lives. When Marina said yes, the first people they embraced were each other. But the second person was Eleanor, who waited for them on the veranda with tears of joy in her eyes. The wedding was a celebration not only of Alexander and Marina's union, but also of the reconstituted family they had created together. Eleanor was officially introduced as the groom's mother, a title she carried with pride and dignity. During Alexander's speech, he spoke emotionally about the two women who had shaped his understanding of love. "My mother, Isabel, taught me that love is generous and unconditional. My mother, Eleanor, taught me that true love is patient and never gives up. Today, marrying Marina, I carry with me these precious lessons on what it truly means to love and be loved." The pregnancy and birth of Isabel Helena brought a completely new dimension to the relationship between Alexander and Eleanor. Seeing the woman who had been deprived of children of her own, finally able to fully exercise her natural motherhood with a granddaughter, was one of the most moving experiences of Alexander's life. Eleanor transformed into the most dedicated and loving grandmother imaginable. She had read extensively about child development, child psychology, and best practices for baby care. When Marina went into labor, it was Eleanor who stood beside Alexander in the waiting room, holding his hand and offering the kind of emotional support that only a mother can give in moments of extreme anxiety. In the first months of the baby's life, Eleanor proved to be an inexhaustible source of practical wisdom and emotional support for the young parents. She instinctively knew how to soothe the baby's crying, when she was hungry versus when she just needed to be held, how to recognize the first signs of fevers or colds. More importantly, she offered Marina the kind of support her own mother could have given, allowing the new mother to rest when necessary and always reassuring her that she was doing a wonderful job. The afternoons at Croft Manor became almost sacred moments. Eleanor would sit in Isabel's favorite armchair in the living room, holding little Isabel Helena, and tell stories about the biological grandmother the child would never know. But these weren't just nostalgic stories about the past. Eleanor had a gift for bringing Isabel into the present, making her seem a living and relevant presence in the family's life. "Your grandmother Isabel loved classical music," Eleanor would say, putting on a Mozart symphony to play softly. "She used to say that music was the universal language of love. I'm sure she would be singing to you now if she were here." Or, "Isabel had the most delicate hands for tending plants. When you're a little older, I'll teach you how to care for her roses. It's a tradition that must continue from generation to generation in this family." Alexander frequently observed these interactions between Eleanor and his daughter with a sense of completeness he had never experienced before. Finally, all the pieces of his family were in the right place. The past had been honored and integrated into the present, and the future seemed bright and full of possibilities. As the years passed, little Isabel Helena grew up in an environment of unconditional love, intergenerational wisdom, and rich and meaningful family traditions. She learned early on about her two grandmothers, Grandmother Isabel, who had passed away before her birth, but whose love lived on through preserved memories, and Grandmother Eleanor, who was present every day, offering unlimited care, guidance, and affection. The child developed a personality that seemed to combine the best of all, the extraordinary women in her lineage. She had Isabel's intellectual curiosity and artistic sensitivity, Alexander's determination and business acumen, Eleanor's compassion and emotional wisdom, and Marina's joie de vivre and natural optimism. When she turned 5, little Isabel Helena surprised the whole family during one of their Sunday afternoons in the garden. She was playing near the grandmother's memorial when she suddenly stopped and asked, "Grandma, Eleanor, why are you always sad when you look at Grandma Isabel's roses?" Eleanor was momentarily speechless. She hadn't realized that her residual sadness was still perceptible to the child. Alexander and Marina, who were arranging the picnic nearby, also paid attention to the conversation. "I'm not sad, darling," Eleanor replied gently. "Sometimes I get nostalgic, which is different. I miss my friend, but I also feel grateful that I can take care of the flowers she loved so much." The girl pondered this for a moment, with the adorable seriousness that children display when they are processing complex concepts. Then she said, "But Grandma Isabel didn't really leave, did she? She's here in the roses, in the stories you tell, in my name, in Daddy's heart, and in your heart too. People we love never leave completely." This profound observation from a 5-year-old touched the entire family in an unexpected way. Alexander realized that his daughter had instinctively understood something that had taken him decades to learn, that true love transcends death, that family is built through active memory and the conscious choice to keep alive the connections that matter to us. Eleanor wept tears of joy upon hearing these words. After all these years, carrying the responsibility of keeping Isabel's memory alive, alone. There was finally a new generation that naturally understood and valued this. Emotional continuity. That night, after little Isabel Helena was tucked into bed, Alexander, Marina, and Eleanor had a long and meaningful conversation about the family's future. They decided to establish some formal traditions that would ensure the lessons of love, sacrifice, forgiveness, and redemption were passed down to future generations. They established that every year, on the anniversary of Isabel's death, the family would gather at the garden. Memorial for a ceremony of gratitude. It wouldn't be a time of mourning, but a celebration of all the ways love can manifest. They would share stories about Isabel, about Eleanor, and about anyone in their lives who demonstrated sacrificial love. They also decided to create an educational fund in the name of both Isabels, a fund designed to help women who, like Eleanor, dedicate their lives to caring for families that aren't biologically theirs. The fund would offer scholarships, financial support in times of need, and public recognition for these silent heroines who hold families together through unconditional love. Alexander personally took on the responsibility of documenting the complete history of his family, including all the details about Eleanor's sacrifice and the importance of forgiveness and redemption in family relationships. He wanted to ensure that future generations understood early on that family is an active choice, not just a biological accident. As the years passed, Croft Manor became an example in the community of how families can be healed and strengthened, even after decades of misunderstandings and pain. Friends and acquaintances frequently sought advice on how to deal with long-standing family conflicts, and both Alexander and Eleanor became advocates for the importance of forgiveness, honest communication, and the willingness to admit mistakes. Eleanor, in particular, became a mentor to other women who found themselves in similar situations: stepmothers, adoptive mothers, caregivers who dedicated their lives to families that didn't always adequately recognize them. She offered emotional support, practical advice, and most importantly, the reassurance that their sacrifices had value and meaning, even when they weren't immediately recognized. Little Isabel Helena grew up witnessing these mentoring activities, absorbing the lessons about compassion, service to others, and the importance of recognizing and valuing the people who demonstrate love through everyday actions. By the age of 10, she already showed signs of possessing the same emotional wisdom and generous spirit that characterized her grandmother, Eleanor. During a school essay on people I admire, the girl wrote about Eleanor. "My grandmother, Eleanor, teaches me that true love doesn't seek recognition or gratitude. It simply loves because it chooses to love. She took care of my father for 30 years, even when he couldn't see how much she loved him. This teaches me that sometimes we need to be patient with the people we love, because they don't always see our love immediately. But if we keep loving, one day they will see, and our family will be stronger because of it." This essay was shared with the entire family and became one of the proudest moments in Eleanor's life. Seeing that her lessons on unconditional love were being absorbed and understood by a new generation validated all the sacrifices she had made over the decades. When Alexander turned 55, the same age his father John was when he married Eleanor, he organized a special celebration, not for himself, but for Eleanor. It was a surprise party to publicly acknowledge her 35 years of dedication to the Croft family. Friends, business associates, neighbors, and even some of Eleanor's former students were invited. Alexander prepared a moving speech that told the complete story of how Eleanor had saved his family through unconditional love and silent sacrifice. He didn't omit details about his own mistakes and blindness, using his experience as an example of how pride can blind us to the love that's right in front of us. Eleanor taught our family that heroism doesn't always wear a cape or receive standing ovations, Alexander said to the emotional audience. Sometimes heroism is simply continuing to love when it's difficult, remaining when it would be easier to leave, choosing to serve when we could demand to be served. For 35 years, Eleanor has been our silent heroine, and today we finally have the opportunity to give her the public recognition she has always deserved. The party was one of the happiest moments in Eleanor's life. After decades of unrequited love and unrecognized sacrifice, she was finally being publicly celebrated by the family she had chosen to protect. But more importantly, she could see that her lessons on love, forgiveness, and redemption were being passed on to a new generation who would grow up understanding these values from childhood. During her acceptance speech, Eleanor said, "When Isabel asked me to take care of her family, I never imagined that I would be the one to receive the greatest gifts. Alexander and Marina gave me the opportunity to be a mother and a grandmother. Little Isabel Helena teaches me every day that love multiplies when it's shared. This family gave me purpose, meaning, and more joy than I ever dreamed possible. I am the one who should be thanking you." That night, after all the guests had left and the family was gathered in the living room, Little Isabel Helena asked a question that perfectly summarized the transformation that had occurred. "Daddy, if Grandma Eleanor hadn't stayed to take care of you, would our family exist today?" Alexander looked at Eleanor, then at Marina, then at his daughter, and replied, "No, my dear. Without Grandma Eleanor, I would never have learned how to truly love. Without her, I would never have become the kind of man who could be a good husband to your mother or a good father to you. Our family exists because she chose to stay and teach us what it means to love unconditionally." And so, the story that began with a box secretly buried in the garden under the moonlight became a family legend about the transformative power of love, forgiveness, and redemption. Croft Manor, once a symbol of rigid tradition and chilly relationships, transformed into a beacon of hope for families everywhere, proving that it's never too late to acknowledge the love that was always there, never too late to ask for genuine forgiveness, and never too late to begin again, based on truth and mutual gratitude. The antique metal box, now on permanent display in the manor's library, serves as a constant reminder that a family's greatest treasures aren't material riches, but the bonds of love we choose to create and maintain across generations. And Eleanor, the woman who for so long was seen as an outsider, finally took her rightful place as the emotional heart of the Croft family, a bridge between past and future, the guardian of the family's most important traditions, unconditional love, generous forgiveness, and the unwavering belief that every family can be healed when there's at least one person willing to love without conditions. The Croft industrial empire, built on legacy and influence, now stands as a testament to the power of family, a power that transcends wealth and status, a power forged in the crucible of forgiveness and understanding. The shadows that once loomed over Croft Manor now recede, replaced by the warm glow of reconciliation. The roses in the back garden, once wilting symbols of a fractured family, now bloom anew, vibrant and strong, mirroring the resilience and newfound unity within the Croft family. John and Isabel, once estranged siblings, now share a bond stronger than ever before, a bond built on honesty, on the shared understanding of a past that once felt insurmountable, but which is now a foundation for a future filled with hope and affection. The empty rooms of Croft Manor, once echoing with unspoken resentments, now resonate with laughter and the joyous sounds of a family reunited. The cold isolation, replaced by the warmth of family, the darkness of secrets, illuminated by the light of truth. This is the legacy, the real legacy, of the Croft family. A legacy built not on wealth and power alone, but on the enduring strength of love, forgiveness, and the unwavering belief in the power of family.